needs to happen? What I think needs to happen is a massive and total overhaul of our entire higher education system. Massive. Massive.
How about dissolving our entire federal agency?
From the way that it's funded, to the way that students take loans, to the standards of admission, everything across the board. That's what I would love to see Donald Trump do. I would love to see him gut and remake our entire higher education system.
It's funny you should mention that, because my wife is in the audience and she can vouch for the story I'm going to tell briefly. When my son was first getting ready to go to college, we went to this event and it was talking about how to pay for college, and we're listening to what they're saying, and we looked at each other and said, basically what they want us to do is mortgage our house at this huge rate and give them money for what? Why would, our thought was, why on earth would we do these things? And it was just building up debt for somebody. And is that, do you see that changing at all under Trump?
I hope so. And I have to add to this, because you brought up the whole rape culture and the Title IX thing, and that is one negative aspect of what's happening on college campuses. But that is only part of a much broader issue. What is happening on college campuses is that, whereas in the past, now I'm 47 years old, I graduated from college in 1992, okay? So, not that long ago. And when I went to college, there were no protests at my college. There were no marches at my college. There was none of that. People went to college to learn, to study, to broaden their worldview. That is not what is happening on the majority of American college campuses right now. College campuses over the last decade have been turned into identity politics factories that are dividing up students by color, race, sexual orientation, and indoctrinating students in concepts of social justice and Marxism. Students are actually applying to college now in order to get involved in protest culture instead of going there to learn something.
Well,
This is a problem. And let me tell you something. One of the terms that you'll hear if you read the Legal Insurrection blog, this is something that I talk about. This is something that Professor William Jacobson, who runs the Legal Insurrection blog, talks about. This is also something that Glenn Reynolds of Instapundit has talked about. In fact, I think he may have coined the phrase. The phrase is the higher ed bubble. It's going to crash. It's going to crash. The student loan debt in this country now tops $1 trillion, and it keeps growing every single graduation
And student
year.
loans are not dischargeable in bankruptcy either.
That's right. Student loans follow you forever. So it's going to reach ahead, and it is going to crash, but I'd like to see Trump fix it before that happens.
Okay, I want to go to you, Chip. Now, you've been involved in Citizens for Limited Taxation for a while. You've seen a lot of things come and go. We have the Trump tax plan, and you have the Trump economy. Now, one of the side effects that I think is going to be an odd side effect of the Trump economy, because we've talked about how blue states like Massachusetts, the deductibility of state and local taxes are going to be curtailed for the ultra-rich. But because of a booming Trump economy, the minimum wage hikes that blue states have mandated, the tax savings from the Trump tax cuts might actually allow some of these businesses to afford them. So will the blue states actually end up using the Trump tax cuts, the savings that businesses are getting, and force that money into social programs, or forcing businesses, well, they make their own regulations to make up for it? And what do you want to see Trump do next in terms of taxes? Or is there a next step, or do we have to wait and see what comes with this?
Just off the bat, I'd say we have to wait and see what comes next. But in terms of the blue states, their tendency is to take the money that's accrued in surpluses from the tax reform of any other program is to spend it. And the classic case was Connecticut. Connecticut 30 years ago didn't have an income tax, didn't have a sales tax. They had a guy, a liberal left-wing nut named Lowell Weicker.
Who was a Republican, by the way.
Yeah, who came in, campaigned against an income tax, and 3 months into his term, when he was elected, he jammed through an income tax. And Connecticut is an economic basket case. Illinois is worse, probably the worst in the country. But Connecticut is second. And they spend. And the only way to cut off the spigot is to reduce the amount of money they get, which is what we did with Prop 2.5 in Massachusetts. When in 1980, when Prop 2.5 passed, the town and city was limited, their property tax levy was limited. They could only go up 2.5% a year over the previous year. So if the town of Melrose, for example, raised $20 million in property taxes, they can go up 2.5% of $20 million the next year.
That's without a vote. With a vote, they can go higher. But
Yeah, with an override. If they have an override approved by the selectmen and the voters approve it at the ballot, they can go above that. But if it weren't for 2.5 and CLT, I might as we pushed it, your property tax bills would be at least double what they are now. And your auto excise would be almost triple. But having said that, I'd like to comment on the education part a little bit.
Certainly.
The education, when I went to Holy Cross, I paid tuition room and board total $2,200 in the mid-60s. It is now about $60,000. But I remember my summer job then, I'd make about $1,000, which would cover the tuition. And it was now a guy named Richard Vedder. He's an economics professor at Ohio University, not Ohio State, Ohio University, and he's written books on why colleges are so expensive. And there's a couple of reasons. Number one is it's labor intensive. That generally 3/4 of the cost of a college, maintaining a college, are the professors' salaries. And they got professors working or teaching 3 or 4 hours a week, and they're making $100,000 a year. Elizabeth Warren made, I think, $345,000 for one course. Yeah, and she talks about tuition. The other thing Vedder mentioned, and I'm glad he reminded me, is the number of administrators. The number of administrators at virtually every college has doubled or tripled. And the number of administrators you would have had 40, 50 years ago, you get a lot more of them. So those are the two driving things, the cost of education. All right. The other thing, I think this would terrify colleges, and I've looked at this over the last 3 or 4 years, is those universities that are advertising online, like Southern New Hampshire University. Why drive to school in bad weather? Why do this when you can just open up a computer and graduate from college? If I were a college man, I'd be terrified about that 50 years from now. Most of the colleges, you'll be working out of your computer.
Especially since they're screaming about rape culture. I don't think there's a rape culture in front of your computer.
Yeah, right. One other quick comment. And I got this last summer when I was at my reunion. I mentioned that when I was at Holy Cross, my parents lived in Norfolk, which is about 40 miles. And if I wanted to go home for a weekend, I just go out on Route 140 and stick my thumb out. And I get a ride. I must have done that 25 times in 4 years. And when I go out on a Friday afternoon, there'd be 4 or 5 other guys out there with their thumb out. And the irony is this, it's much safer today to do that than it was 40 or 50 years ago. Because the crime rates have plummeted in the last 20 years. And I tell that to students, they're astonished. It's like I told them I just climbed Mount Everest. But do you ever see a kid climbing today? Never.
Okay, Mike, you had a very quick comment, and then I want to get to Diane.
I just want to quickly comment on something that Chip brought up that is extremely important. And when you're looking at colleges and universities, is the administrators, not only the number of administrators and the exorbitant salaries that many of them make, but look at the titles. There was a time when you had a college president and a college vice president, and then maybe you had some particular department heads. Now you have the vice president of diversity, and the social justice coordinator, and the bias administrator. These are real jobs, some of which pay 6 figures. To essentially, what they're doing is just advancing the left's agenda. With your money.
With your money that you're being encouraged to borrow by the state. Now, Diane, you're part of Act for America. As I said, it's a organization that deals with security, with radical Islam, and the whole 10 yards. Now, obviously, we've talked about the fall of ISIS and the unleashing of the American military. We've also seen the court battles to stop the Trump vetting, and this is the thing I don't understand, well, that I do understand, but I think is ironic, that Trump hasn't said we don't want refugees, he has said we want to vet these refugees. Because I work with, in fact, next week I'll be interviewing an Iraqi refugee, a woman who, her story is amazing. You're going to want to check my site for the story of Hannah in a couple of weeks. It's an amazing story about a woman who's gone through some things. What do you expect to see in terms of the war on terror, and will the courts eventually uphold the president's rules concerning vetting people coming into the country, which to me seems just normal? Why wouldn't you vet people? Would you just let anybody into your house? I just don't understand it.
So I think this is going to be a slow, painful process because we are at war. So I have a question for the group. How many people are worried about actual terrorism? Somebody driving and smashing into you in the shopping mall, or somebody strapping a bomb on a vest like the marathon bomber? How many people are worried about that? Okay. How many people are worried about civilization jihad? Anybody in this room know what that is? Okay, so we should be more worried about civilization jihad, because that is what's happening every single day, college campuses. If I miss some of your question, then go back to it, but this is the thing that we are not paying attention to, okay? So when you talk about the rape culture, I feel that this is related to that. So civilization jihad is exactly what's going on. The refugee resettlement program is a big scam, number one. It's a big moneymaker. We spend, at the very minimum on the conservative side, $12,000 per year per refugee. Think about that, $12,000. Okay, so if they come over a family of four, $60,000. How many families of four live off of $60,000 in the state of Massachusetts, right? So civilization jihad is connected to the refugee resettlement program. Because if you look at a map of the United States, you could see where they are strategically placing these people all over the United States, right? Then their numbers grow. They outpopulate us. They do. They outpopulate us like 8-1 or something, right? They come over, they say they have one wife, they really have four. Okay, this is true. This is true. So this is the thing that we are not paying attention to, because you see things like what's going on, which to me smells of Sharia. So let me just tell you, Saudi Arabian money flows into colleges in the millions, in the tens of millions.
That is an issue that nobody was talking about, by the way. But this is something that you need to know about.
Huge issue, and and then I'm going to go to the Trump, which is connected to that. There are also two huge organizations on college campuses that are causing this problem. Muslim Student Association, look it up. There are over 600 chapters, okay, on college campuses across the United States, right? So this Saudi money comes in, it funds Middle Eastern studies. They send their own teachers over, then a mosque comes up. They send their own imams, right? On the college campuses, they teach the cleaned up part of Islamic history.
And anti-Semitism.
And anti-Semitism, right? And so even in the western part of Massachusetts, you have a lot of refugees, and there's also a rise in anti-Semitism. So civilization jihad, you have to look this up. Okay, so the other organization is Students for Justice in Palestine. Okay, they have over 200 chapters, and they have affiliate groups. MIT.
I want to touch on something that you just brought up, and I know you want to bring up the MIT thing. One of the things President Trump has done has cut funds to the Palestinians.
Exactly.
And I'd like you, as part of your answer to the question, how is that going to affect the Middle East, and will it make a difference?
So it will, I think, long term. So I get calls, I get emails. President Trump does something, people freak out. Okay, we're at war, right? And so these people, the Muslim Brotherhood, has been in the United States since the 1950s, okay? So they have almost a 70-year head start, right? So one thing that President Trump does is not going to end everything. So he's going to stop giving money to the Palestinians, right? The term Palestinian was invented in the 60s by Yasser Arafat.
1964.
It's BS. It's not even the truth, right? And so what did they use? They used words like Turks, right? Ottomans, Palestinians. They all practice the same ideology, political Islam. It's all the same. So, Palestinians, I hate using that word, they get paid. They get paid if they blow up an Israeli, if they kill an Israeli. They get paid. Streets get named after them. So President Trump looked at this and said, what the hell are we doing? We're giving them money to kill our friends? So that's a great thing that he's doing. But I just want to throw a couple things out that he's done in the Middle East, right? He sent a strong message to Saudi Arabia months and months and months ago, right? People didn't know what he did there, right? But what was it, within the last month? Saudi Arabia, they started arresting people in the Saudi family, powerful business people.
There's been real reforms in Saudi Arabia. It's been frightening.
Whether or not these will stick, because the ideology of political Islam is that you can lie to advance Islam. So let's see, but we have a great president who will, I think, make it stick. But one of the princes, I didn't write his name
I can't pronounce his name either,
but
so don't worry
he's
about
one
it.
of the guys, a billionaire, philanthropist, gave $10 million to Harvard, okay?
Al-Walid.
Yes, Al-Walid. Gave $10 million to, I think, Colombia, right? So the Saudis are big problems. So dozens of arrests, you can look that up. He's also dropped an unprecedented amount of bombs, surpassing what Obama did in the Middle East to get rid of ISIS. ISIS is part of the problem, but the civilization jihad is the bigger part. He recognized, what did President Trump do? He recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, and they're going to move the embassy. That's huge. He's dealing with Iran, and this recently came out. They just formed, it's called the Hezbollah Financing and Narco-Terrorism Team. Look that up. Obama is going to has been implicated in that, right? So there's all this connection, and people overlook that big part of what's happening in our country.
Okay, I actually want to jump on something she said because I wrote about it. The Obama administration, the Drug Enforcement Agency, actually traced Hezbollah smuggling cocaine into the inner cities. And the president squashed the arrests and the going after these people because he did not want to jeopardize the Iran deal. So he literally let drugs into the inner cities where black Americans live and cocaine into the inner cities and allowed the trafficking to go on for the sake of the Iran deal. And that's what Diana's talking about. I wrote about it. You have not read about it in the mainstream media.
And that money goes back to fund terrorism. And so the last thing, Chicago, right? Mm-hmm. Chicago is like Chicago. People don't realize this. It's the headquarters for Hamas in the United States of America. Okay? So that should give you an idea of why there's we have so many problems there.
All right, and that's Valerie.
Is this tied in with the Pelican Project? You know anything about the Pelican Project?
I thought that was a movie, but I don't know.
I have to have you write that down, the question on it.
I'll look that up.
Okay, now, Chris, I wanted to ask you a question in terms of media because you've got the radio show. Now, we've seen the media all year. It's being Trump 24/7, disaster, 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 to the point where the fact that we're not all dead in the streets after 1 year is a great accomplishment because apparently we were all going to die, we were all going to starve, we were going to have no food, we were going to have no health care, gays were going to be strung up in the line, and all these people were going to be dead and dying and so forth. The apocalypse was upon us, and yet it has not happened. Do you anticipate the media learning from this strategy? There was a great cartoon, I don't know if you saw it, of parodying the Hawaii alert thing where there's all these reporters looking at these phones saying, oh, Trump about to be impeached this, and this guy saying, boy, I'm getting sick of these alerts. Will the media learn from this, and what will we see from the media? As a person who hosts a radio show and talks to people, what will we see from the media, and what will we see from the people this year concerning Trump?
Learning? No. I said this in one of your questions before. The answer is no, and secondly, no. The answer is no. I keep going back to the Walter Cronkite thing I said. The press is completely hell-bent, indoctrinated They're never going to learn. They're going to completely ignore their failing ratings. Somebody's going to keep throwing money at them. It's going to continue.
Now, is this because that they've become a niche market, and because you have a niche market that's anti-Trump, you have to feed
That's
that
it.
market because they're the ones who are paying the bills?
Yes. Okay, so opposite. The answer is yes and yes. Yes, that's exactly what's happening. They found a niche market. They've somehow adopted capitalism all of a sudden, and so they've found their niche market in selling to their audience. But as far as will the press learn from this, they won't learn from it because of this niche market. But despite the fact that a lot of this is going on around them, this great economy, the exposure, Diane, great piece that you just said about the infiltration of Islam in our country. Despite the fact that these things are front and center and are glaring, it's not going to make any difference in the press at all in any way. To expand upon that, what Mike said about college, because we are graduating the next generation of mindless, useful idiots, to coin a communist phrase here. And college, if you look at college, it falls under progressivism. And one of the things you need to understand about progressivism is that they're always about segregation. They're always about disenfranchising, labeling, itemizing different groups. And the reason why they do this is the old concept of divide and conquer. It's easy to do that. So when you have a college that you go into college and you don't learn anymore, you're not learning history. I don't want to become a teacher. I don't want to become a scientist, a biologist, or whatever. And for the record, folks, I never went to college, so I have no debt and I have no say in that game. But what we're doing now is we are creating the next generation of segregationists. Sign up for gay studies, sign up for transgender studies, sign up for this studies. Oh, I'm African American, sign up for that, sign up for this. Oh, I'm Muslim, so I have to get involved in these Muslim groups. I have to do all of this and that. And that's what they're doing. And somehow it's under the guise of freedom of education. But all it is a modern day segregation. You're being marginalized into your small groups. So it's easier for the left to control you on that.
All right, now I'm going to add Mike Rogers to this because he has been filming for Granite Rock, and you were the only person here who lives in a purple state. And I'm adding you to this because I wanted to get at least one perspective from a purple state that either voted for Trump last time and had it stolen or just missed it. What will the effect on a state like New Hampshire, presuming that we don't have another 10,000 people from Massachusetts voting in your next election, what will the last year that we've seen from Trump, what effect will that have on New Hampshire politics, New Hampshire's congressional representation and so forth?
I think it'll be entirely positive. Many people in New Hampshire that were not for Trump initially have come around to him. The groundswell for Trump was much bigger than anybody really thought. You know, like one of the other panelists, I would talk to people and I would find more and more people were pro-Trump than, and willing to say so, than you would expect. The other thing is I travel around a lot with a Make America Great Again hat on. And believe it or not, I've never had anybody throw anything, spit in my face, or say...
Now this is in New Hampshire.
Yeah, or say nasty things, and outside of New Hampshire. But I've had lots of people say, "Great hat, where did you get it?" There's something going on that you just don't see. But I also think the improvement in the economy, the fact that the governor, whilst a rather moderate Republican, is saying good things about Trump, and that there are people coming forward to run for Congress that are pro-Trump and not afraid of it anymore, I think all this helps. And yes, it was just stolen last time.
Is the media selling a false story to the people in New Hampshire in terms of what is going to happen in the next election?
Absolutely. Even the union leader has leaned over to the left, and the stories in it barely trustworthy anymore. So I actually had a couple of things I want to wind back on.
Okay,
real quick.
say them quickly, because after you do that, I want to give a closing shot for everybody here on the panel.
Yeah.
By the way, I should point out, Mike was on our last panel, and Granite Grok, we want to thank Granite Grok for streaming this event to the users here. And before Mike speaks, I also want to point out that both the Worcester Tea Party and Christopher, who got here early, did some yeoman work setting up. The video is going to be available for those of you who did not come and share our meal. Shame on you, you missed out on a great meal. That will be available later. But Mike, finish your thought, and then we're going to close with the panel.
Sure. So I wanted to wind back to what you said on taxes and the Democrats' reaction to it. I think it's actually pretty funny. Not only do you have the elitism on show where the Democrats are saying, oh, $2,000 bonus, $2,000 bonus. Why isn't it a permanent pay raise? This is just crumbs. This is posturing. That in itself shows off their elitism. But that is far from the worst of it. The worst of it was when they made their case against the cap on state and local tax deductions, and they used rich Californian taxpayers as the poor victims of this tax change, and they actually used as one of their examples a $1 million CXO in a California company paying tens of thousands of dollars in state taxes, in property taxes, in charitable deductions, and this poor thing was going to be a couple of tens of thousands of dollars out of pocket out of his million. Please tell me, how is this the party of the little guy? I think they have exposed themselves. And by the way, that is one of the things Trump excels at. He gets them to expose themselves. Voila, we have the Schumer shutdown. Thank you, Mitt Mulvaney, one of the unsung heroes of the administration.
All right, very good, Mike. Now, I'm going to close with the panel. I want to give each member of the panel about 5 or 6 minutes. I'll give you the high sign to let you know when your time is up. I'm going to let you speak extemporaneously. I'm going to start from this end because I've been starting with you, Mike, all night. We're going to start with Chris. Say what you want to say about President Trump, about what you expect to see, or something that we do not know you think is going to happen. Your comments on Trump year 1 and the upcoming Trump year 2.
The economy is going to improve. It's already on its way. There's no stopping the train heading down this track. Despite what the Democrats do with the shutdown, it's all on them. Despite anything else that comes through the news media, it's going to... What's happening now is everyone is seeing the falsehoods, and we're all paying attention to the falsehoods. I had mentioned earlier about disregarding the polls. Disregard anything you hear. Next time you hear an ABC, Washington Post poll, Trump down 20%, disregard it. Disregard it. Trump will hold a rally next week, 20,000 people will show up. End of story. Get it? Got it? Good.
Okay, Chris, before you go, where can people find your radio show?
You can find my radio show basically on ktntradio.com. We air every Tuesday and Wednesday nights. And of course, I'm on Facebook. Just hit Facebook/The Meat and Potato Show. To continue what I'm saying here, on my blog, I've written a bunch of stuff about points of liberalism, and you can catch my blog. You want another shot here? thelexingtongreen.blogspot.com. I'll say it again, thelexingtongreen.blogspot.com. I'm writing a multi-part series, which is something I've done many times before over the 10 years I've been doing this show. It's called The 5 Points of Liberalism. I'll list them quite simply. 1, acceptance of the absurd. 2, selective outrage. 3, conviction of position. 4, cognitive dissonance. And 5, lack of principles. And summing them all up, these are the 5 things that we're seeing every single day in the press, every single day when Chuck Schumer gets up there and speaks, or Nancy Pelosi speaks, or any of them speaks, even on our side. there's an acceptance of the absurd that somehow DACA is more important than our military. The selective outrage. We're upset about this one thing while at the same time accepting the other, which is somehow intrinsically connected. And they're convinced of their position. No matter how hard you try with the liberals, they will always fight back. It's a closed loop system. Cognitive dissonance, no matter what you say, no matter how much evidence you push to a liberal that you're talking to, they completely disconnect. All this is in my blog. And 5, lack of principle. Everything that a conservative does is based on principle. Our founders, in the Declaration of Independence, it says we hold these truths. Principles are based on fundamental truths. Our founders didn't say, you know, we kind of believe that this thing is... No, they had a fundamental holding of these truths based on principle. And so, anyway, we're writing that in the blog, and we'll be sending that out there. And I want to thank everyone for this panel, and we'll pass it on.
Dianna, to you, what are we going to see this year?
I think we're going to see this year. I was going to hang it up. We're going to see this. Okay? We are going to see that. I really, one of the most important things that I feel like President Trump is showing people is his work ethic. And a lot of that is missing from our younger generation. And so I think, you know, that role modeling, I think, well, you know, I look forward to seeing more of that. I want to just impart on everybody that we are in this for the long haul, and that we can't get stuck on battles. We're going to lose battles, but we have to focus that, you know, I feel like I'm doing this for the future generation. So we can't get stuck. We can't get mired on those little battles that we may lose, right? As long as we learn something from them, I think, you know, we're better off for the future. So I try to remind people, you know, when people send me emails or they call me. The other thing is, I try to encourage people, don't fight with these people. Don't fight. It's time out of your life that you will never get back, right? If they already are dead set against Trump or against what you believe in, why waste your time? You're not going to convince them. You're better off educating yourself around the issues, around what's going on. Start looking. At some point, I'm going to put something out on the internet about OCPF, where you can learn. That's the Office of Campaign and Political Finance, where you can see where donors and who the donors are who are donating to these people, right? So I'm going to put that. So I just want to remind you, just don't fight. Educate yourself. You can find me at 3 places. Dianna Ploss, which is my public page, Dianna with 2 N's, Ploss with 2 S's.